Hi everyone, and welcome to another meetup of Romania Power BI and Modern Excel user group. This is the first one in April, and as I just said, Jay earlier, this is we have a round number. We are celebrating the 50th meetup of ROPAG. Woo! Thank you all for joining, and thank you for being here, learning with us instead of being anywhere in the world and do anything else. We are really happy to have you, and hopefully, uh, we will learn something really cool from Jay with something that was just announced and it's still in preview. For our newest members, my name is Christian Angel, and together with the second Christian Prifty, we will be your host today. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as we are sharing as much as we can uh, in this very dynamic Power BI world. Quick run through on our agenda. We are on the welcome and overview part now. I will shortly present our next two meetups. Then Jay will have his feature session, which will be ended with a Q&A at the end. Then we will have a few minutes for the enterprise DNA raffle, and I will give you some more details in a few minutes, and then we will wrap up, close the recording, and we can stay for chit chat afterwards. Some house rules. During the session, please make sure your microphone is muted and your video is turned off. Well, you don't have to worry about it. I already took care. Meanwhile, Teams is helping. But if you have a question, please type it in the chat area or comments. But for questions, if you have a specific question that needs to be answered, please prefix it with a Q so we can spot it easier. If you have any problem with the internet connection, please drop off and join again as the meeting is recorded and Teams is helping us with this. This is the pinpoint that I was telling you about, Jay. This is a reminder for myself to start the recording. It happened before, so in 50 meetups, we can have lots of things. Well, our next two meetups will be the Romanian track for April, and then we are switching in May. We are starting with the Romanian one. On the 24th of April, Romulus Milea will come with a session with bad practices in Excel and how to avoid them. So everybody's speaking about good practices or best practices. Well, I loved the idea of presenting bad practices. So we will have this. And then on the 9th of May, Christy Prifty will not be a host anymore. I will be there, and he will have a session on Power Apps and Power BI. And it seems that I forgot to update the slide. But, well, it's my mistake. Sorry, Christy. But I'm really looking forward for your session. Both of them both of them will be in Romanian, and they will be recorded just like most of our former meetups, just exactly like this one. Everything is recorded, and for whoever cannot join us live, they can go on our YouTube channel and find the entire playlist of meetups there. As I said, we have a partnership with the Enterprise DNA, sorry, who is our primary official sponsor since 2021, August 2021, offering two memberships on monthly basis on their platform, two 1-year memberships with access to the entire platform, which is really, really good and growing every month. But in order to allocate these two memberships, we have a raffle because we don't have enough friends just like this. So we have a raffle in the end. And in order to participate in the raffle, please scan the QR code or fill up the form. And even if you don't want to participate in the raffle, please fill up the form with the feedback so we can improve our future meetups. Don't worry if you don't have the time to get the links here. I will paste them during Jay's session in the chat area. Well, coming back to the session today. Thank you again, Jay, for accepting our invitation. As I've told you before, I was really, really happy when you accepted to talk about it and come to our meetup. So I'm really, really happy to have you here. For who doesn't know Jay, he is the man in DAX. So he's the owner. He's the owner of DAX inside the entire Power BI thing, and he's been working on these visual calculations since 3 years now. So yeah, the entire feature is still in preview. And by the way, I just saw today form that you were posting on LinkedIn asking for feedback. I will find the link again and put it also for our members and our attendees here. Hopefully we can improve it, even if it's already, as I said, it's the entire feature is great for beginners or people who are not understanding yet DAX, or for really experienced people who can do some quick and dirty things that they need. Let's say it like this.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, a few words about you, and the stage is yours.
Sure. So, well, thanks, Christian, and the other Christian as well for having me. Mulțumesc. That's the only Romanian that I'm going to say. And I know not all of you speak Romanian, but I had to throw it in there anyway. So I'll start by sharing my screen. And so while that's building up, we can quickly talk about who I am, or as far as Christian didn't do a good job of introducing myself already. So I'm Jeroen. I go by Jay. I am originally from the Netherlands. That's why I have this weird name that nobody really understands how to pronounce. So please feel free to just call me Jay. I work at Microsoft as a product manager on the Power BI team, and I focus, as Christian has said, on the programming language you all love to hate called DAX. And you might know me from maybe social media, some LinkedIn or some other social media. You might have seen me on conferences as well. I'm pretty active in the community. If at any point you want to reach out to me, don't hesitate. Feel free. Find me on LinkedIn. Send me an email. Find me on. I don't think I'm very active on X anymore. I think X is now my X social media. But I am now over on Blue Sky as well with the same handle. But LinkedIn works best right now for me. So yeah, feel free to just reach out at any time. Also, while we're talking about this topic today, which is visual calcs, as we already said, please use the chat. If you have specific questions, use the queue in front. That makes it easier. We'll have a specific moment in the slide deck after the demo. They'll pause for questions, and then we can take more questions at the end. So this is your time. So let's make it an interactive session as much as we can. So with that, let's just get started on this. So who here has seen visual calculations before? Can you raise your hand in the Teams thing? Or if you have the camera on, you can raise your hand. Okay, so some of you have seen visual calcs before. Not all of you, so I'll have to do a little bit of the intro. But you know, just making sure that I like understand a little bit where you are, where all of you are. So thanks. Okay, so with that, let's just get in. The reality today with DAX is it is very hard. Like, we get feedback over and over and over again for the last couple of years that DAX is hard as in the top 4 or 5 of challenges that people have with our product. The product of Power BI, right? And it's interesting to think about that we got this far in our journey as Power BI as a tool with our core programming language being perceived as so hard, right? DAX being hard as a blocker for people to use it, and then Power BI being so successful. It's really a testament to the rest of the quality of the rest of the product that, you know, we got this far with our core programming language being this hard. And the reality today, honestly, is that this is how most of us write DAX, right? You find something somewhere, you find it maybe online or in some book, or you copy paste and you type it over, you press enter, you cross your fingers. If you're so inclined, you invoke some higher DD, and that's it, right? That's how I write my DAX. That is how everybody writes their DAX, right? Of course, you can all write your very simple sum statement, and you can all write your very simple things. But the moment I start typing calculate, I don't know how it is about you all, but for me, when I start typing calculate, I already get the tingles, the spider sense going like, yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to work, right? I always struggle a little bit. And then, of course, you can go on forums and in user groups and in blogs, and you might have read the books, right? This one, the classic, right? You might have read this, and you went through it, and you were like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Not completely.
So you read it again, and you still don't get it, and you read it again, and you still don't get it. That's where I am. I'm on my first read through, and I still don't get it. And I own this language at Microsoft. It's interesting. So that's one. The other one I want to show is this one. It's a proud Dutch product from two Dutch MVPs, friends of mine, Henk and Michiel. This one is great for if you already did this or have this. They do a quick summary, and then they have way more practical things. So, for example, if you're looking to do inventory analysis or business between companies, how would you solve that using DAX? So this is really more about business cases and practical applications of the language. This is more the theoretical foundation. But it's interesting that for you to be successful with Power BI, you have to learn these languages, this language DAX, and you have to almost take the training on day one. It's a bit worrying for us. So we started thinking, how can we make that easier? And just to give you another example, things that people think are very simple normally are very hard to do. For example, if you ever try to do a running sum in Power BI, which is not rocket science, it's very simple, basic math, right? You don't need multiplication, you don't need division, you only need addition, the ability to add a couple numbers. That is 21 steps to do that. If you search online to do a running total or a running sum in DAX, you'll find this website that says 21 steps. 21 steps. That is 20 steps too many, if you ask me. This should be simple stuff. We're not talking rocket science here. This should be simple, basic things that are simply not possible in DAX. So the book, Ragnar is asking for the book. So it's Extreme DAX. That's one. And the other one is the classic, and I think the Christians can find that one, right? The Definitive Guide to DAX by Russo and Ferrari. So yeah, those two I would highly recommend. Okay, so let's face it, right? What we up against is DAX is hard, and to be exact, what makes DAX hard is filter context, and the fact that you will have calculations in DAX are normally called measures, and those measures are scoped to the model, and really they have to deal with the complexity of the whole model. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then typical business type calculations that people think are easier, that your manager or your customer might say are very easy, like just add a running sum, just add a moving average, are really hard to do. And then we have something called quick measures, but quick measures, it just generates DAX, and the DAX it generates is still very complicated. And it is still very, very hard to tweak. So it does help, but if you want something that is slightly different to what quick measures generates, it is not really helpful because you still have to learn all the DAX. So what if you could turn this all upside down? What if we allowed you to find a calculation at a different stage in the pipeline? So let me talk about that pipeline. So when I say pipeline, I'm not talking about data flows. I'm not talking about pipelines over there. I'm talking about the Power BI pipeline after the data has been loaded, right? So you load the data in from the source, you query the data into Power Query or whatever, right? And then you load the data into your data model. So that's where it really enters the Power BI engine, right? The data has been loaded. You see all these tables in the model view. You can add relationships. You know what I'm talking about. That's what I call the model, okay? So there you define your measures. Your measures live in the model. So these DAX measures you write have to be aware of the context of the model they're in, right? Whenever that measure gets executed, there is a context, and that context is called filter context, and that is what dictates the result of the measure. So if your measure says sum of sales amount, it might return all sales for all years, for all products, for all countries, or it might return sales in 2024 for yellow products sold in Romania, right? That same DAX statement might return something completely different based on the context. We don't do a good job of explaining you that context or showing that context. And if you want to make sure that the DAX measure always generates the right result, you have to be almost defensive in writing your DAX statement to make sure it actually does what it needs to do all the time. So it's very complicated to write correct DAX statements in here and to test them. So then after that has been done, when you start painting a visual onto the screen, let's say you create a column chart or a bar chart, what Power BI does, it will take the raw data that's in this model and aggregate it to the number of columns or bars or whatever you have been asking for, right? Let's say you have all this sales amount with individual sales records over here, but you want to see the total sales over years. Well, we're not showing you millions of individual sales records. You asked for a total. So what we're doing, we're taking all this unaggregated data with these measures, and we're aggregating it, compacting it, summing it towards a visual. So in that step of aggregation, you lose a lot of detail, which sounds bad, but it's actually good because you cannot process millions of rows. The reason we are all in business is because people can only process a couple data points at a time, like 7 or 10 or whatever, right? So you need to sum it. So great. So now you want to see a bar chart. Then at that time, when Power BI is about to paint that column chart onto your screen, we have the aggregated data. What if we allowed you to, at that stage, after the data has been aggregated, allowed you to write a calculation? And what if, at that point, we would make it easier to write the DAX other than what you have to do with measures today? And what if, on top of that, you don't have to do a lot of typing? We would provide ways of doing that without relying on typing so much. Wouldn't that be great? Well, that is really what visual calcs are. Visual calculations or visual calcs are DAX calculations defined on the visual. So they are not in the model, they are on the visual, later in the pipeline. But they are not a new language. They are just DAX. So things you already know about DAX, stuff you already know, is still applicable. Loads of the functions that are available in DAX will work. So it's not a brand new language. It's just that we give you another opportunity to do calculations instead of forcing you to do calculations in the model with the unaggregated data where all the complexity of the model lives. We allow you to do calculations later when the data is easier to understand and simpler to handle because it's been aggregated. And then on top of that, we give you extra tricks because now we suddenly have a DAX calculation that is inside of a visual, so it's now visual aware. It knows what visual it's being executed in. So it can do interesting things that measures can't because they can never know what visual they're executed in. And it just makes things easy because you don't have to worry about the stuff that makes DAX hard, the filter context. So the things that visual calcs do, they are calculations on the visual. They can refer to whatever is on the visual, including any other visual calc. They cannot refer back into the model. And that might sound weird, but that's because if we allowed you to reach back out the house, let's imagine the visual is a little house, right? You do visual calculations inside the little house, all the data on the visuals inside of the house. If we allowed you to reach back out, you would have to worry about filter context again. You would have to think about that again. Here, inside this little house, the filter context is outside, has already been applied. You don't have to worry about all the complexity. The only thing you have to worry about is the stuff that you can actually see, the stuff that is on the visual. Okay? So it makes it way easier to work with it. Now, if this is brand new to you, you might go like, but wait, we already had calculated columns. We already had measures. Now are you just adding another thing? I'm confused. So here's the comparison. We do have calculated columns. We do have measures. We're now adding visual calculations. We're not taking any of these away from you. All of these have their place. But you can think about visual calculations as if calculated columns and measures had a child together, because it's the best of both worlds. Calculated columns are great because it's very simple to understand how they work. You can look at the table and you can see, hey, I can see the execution of a calculated column row by row by row. I can see how this thing is happening. And I know some people want to get rid of calculated columns. We might eventually, but right now they're here, right? So, but we learned from calculated columns that it's very easy to understand how they operate, because you can look at it and go like, I understand how this number got here for every single row, because they're executed row by row. You're only working with row context, not with filter context. The downside of calculated columns, of course, they're pre-calculated. So they bloat up your model, they store all the results in the model, they slow down your refresh, so they're not a great solution for many cases. Second, we have measures. Measures are great because they are calculated on the fly. They don't bloat your model. It's great. The downside of measures is you have to worry about filter context and all the complexity that surrounds that. It's really hard to understand how exactly they operate and how exactly they work. It's really hard to predict their results. Then with visual calcs, we actually took the best things from calculated columns and measures and we brought them together. So we said, let's do it row by row by row. Let's make it very visual from the calculated column, but let's take the on-the-fly calculation from a measure and add that into one feature. And that is what is called visual calculations. So what are visual calculations? Is the WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You can you can use point and click if you want. If you don't want to type, you will be able to do that eventually. Not right now, but in the future. You're just working with whatever is inside the little box. And we'll have new tricks, new functions that I'll show you that just makes your life easier. So if you forget everything that I said so far, this is the one thing that I want you to remember. For you to be successful using visual calcs, you have to remember the mental model. And the mental model is something that you might have seen from Explore already, is that any visual can be represented as a matrix. So take a line chart or a column chart or a map or a tree map. Don't use a pie chart, but any visual, you can always represent it as a matrix, right? You can always show that same visual as a matrix. That matrix might have multiple levels, but you can do it. Now, in Explorer, we actually show you the same. If you look at the Explorer preview that we have, we show you the visual matrix, the visual and the matrix as well. They're tied together, right? The matrix shows what the visual shows and vice versa. Here we have exactly the same idea. I think we were first, but anyway, that's okay. It's not a battle I wanna have. So when you're working with visual calcs, you're actually working with the visual matrix. The visual matrix shows the data that's in the visual, including any calculations. So when you define a calculation on the visual, you're actually defining a calculation on the column in the visual matrix. And then you can decide what you want to show on the visual. So if you look here on my slide here on the mockup, you'll see that there is a visual over here that has 1, 2, 3 years, right? So it's 3 groups. And for each group, there is 2 bars. So it's 2 series. So one series like that, and then the other series, right? So for Power BI to paint this visual onto your screen, it doesn't need a lot of stuff. It only needs 3 rows and 3 columns. 1 column for the group, the year in this case, 1 column for each series. So 2 series, 2 columns. And then 1 line, 1 row for each group. So we have 3 groups. So we end up with a matrix of 3 rows and 3 columns. That's exactly what we show you down. If I actually had my mouse pointer over here somewhere, but we actually show you down there below the formula bar. That is what is shown there. There might be millions of data points in here, might be millions of data rows. You don't need that. In fact, you're not interested in that at all at this point. And then your visual calcs are the things that you extend on that visual matrix. Make sense? Okay, so let's see. Let's take a quick look at a demo, and we can take some questions after. Cool. So I just switched over to my Power BI desktop. I'm using AdventureWorks. Simple data set. Everybody knows it. So there's no trickery here. I'm using our live product. I'm not showing you any slides or whatever. So it's not a mock-up. This is actually really in the product. You can try this as well today. You can go and enable this preview. It's been out there since February 2024, so it's been out there for a little bit. But we've been designing this feature for like 3 years. So for us, it feels like it's only been out there for a couple weeks, right? In relative terms. So if you want to enable it, you can go into options and preview settings, enable it, restart desktop, and you can keep going. You can also do this, by the way, online in the service. This is not a normal visual. I just created a fiscal year with sales amount and total product cost. And I'm just going to resort this to make things slightly easier. And then if I have a visual selected, I have this new button that's enabled over here, the new calculation button. If I don't have that visual selected, that button is disabled. Makes sense? Because this is where you define a visual calc. And as I told you, visual calcs are on a visual. So you need to tell us what visual you want to work with. So select the visual, click new calculation, and now, and I'll hide some of these things, you'll see that we are in a place we call the visual calculations edit mode, which should feel familiar with the slide that I've just shown you. It is essentially that mockup, right? You see the visual here, right? The bars, the series. You see the bars in the series over here, but then in a matrix format. And you can check that these two things are the same. You can see here, I've got 51 million something for 2020 for the sales amount. That same number shows up over here, right? Same number, right? So the visual matrix shows what the visual shows and vice versa. Now, in here on the right, I can now add calculations, and we already added a placeholder calculation that is very inviting, hopefully, for you to start typing. So I can add some stuff to this visual matrix, and that will be my first visual calculation. I'm going to start with one that I know should have been a measure. And so don't blame me for that. I know it's just a very simple example. We'll do more interesting examples in just a second. Okay. So I'll just do a very simple one. That is profit. Profit is sales amount minus total product cost. Now, notice that if the IntelliSense only shows me the stuff that is actually on the visual matrix, right? As you might have noticed, and if you know AdventureWorks data model, there's more tables, there's more details in this data model. I can only work with what is on this visual right here, on this visual matrix, which is on purpose, right? So it makes it very simple to understand what I need to do, right? So I'm just effectively creating a profit calculation by taking the current sales amount minus the current total product cost. I don't need an aggregate in here. I don't need to write sum of sales amount minus sum of total product cost as I should do in a measure. And again, this should have been a measure. I don't need to write all of that because this is operating as a calculated column, so row by row, and for each row there is only one sales amount and only one total product cost. So you don't need to add that aggregate. In fact, the fact that you have to write the sum of sales amount minus sum of total product cost in a measure is something that trips up beginners all the time. Like, sales amount and total product costs are right there. Why can I not just write sales amount minus total product cost in a measure and be done with it? That's because measures operate differently than calculated columns. So you can just write this, and that will give me my profit. This is, of course, such a core calculation that really that should have been a measure because I can easily reuse it. But for a simple example, let's do that. Okay, so now I want to calculate the diff profit. So I want to take the profit, and I want to calculate the difference in each profit versus the previous year. So I have profit, and now I want to get the profit from the previous year to subtract it from the profit, right? To calculate the difference in each year. So maybe you can put that in the chat. Any guesses to the function I would use to get the previous profit? Any ideas? Somebody knew this before. Right, so previous is indeed the right answer. Sometimes I get previous year or same period last year or date add or earlier. Those are all answers from measures, and previous year doesn't exist. But and previous is indeed the right answer. You can just write previous and then say, I want to get the previous profit. Now you can do more stuff in this that allows you to step multiple years back, etc., etc. But it's just a very basic things. The default one is just a previous one step back. So what this will do is we'll say for each row, look at the current profit and then subtract the profit from the row above me. That's previous. Will this work? Well, of course this works because I designed it. So there you go. Now we have a difference in profit. Very cool, right? I hope it's cool. Let's do something more intelligent. Let's do that running sum. So I want to do a running sum of profit. Okay, so what would be the function I would use to do a running sum of profit? And if you already know the answer, then please don't type that into chat. Let's play the game a little bit. What do you think is the running sum? To get a running sum of profit, what function would I use? Any guesses? Anybody? dot dot dot. Christian goes like, yeah, I know the answer, so I'm not allowed to type. Filter and all, maybe a sum x, maybe. The answer is actually very simple. It is literally just running sum. It is so simple. You just write running sum of profit. It is almost like English. Would this work? Well, yeah, of course this works. I designed it. It works. Okay, so let's do one more. How about a moving average? Well, we have this whole things of templates over here that allows you to find out what you can do with this language. You don't have to use these templates. It's just a way for you to find your way around to us to show you the new functions that are available. So if you ever struggle doing a running sum or a moving average or percent of parent, percent of grand total, average of children versus previous versus next versus first versus last, you can use these templates. In fact, I've already shown you running sum and versus previous, the exact same things. Let's do a moving average. Any guesses to the function name for moving average? You should know my brain by now. You should be able to fill this one out, right? Like for previous, the function name is called previous. For running sum, the function is called running sum. So for moving average, what would it be? And Nico says moving AVG. That is even way too complicated because it's average, just average. Anyway, there we go. It's just called moving average. It is so simple. Okay, so profit, and then I want to do moving average over profit, and then I need to specify window size. Window size means how many years do I want to take the average over? I only have 3 years here, so if I did 3, I would always average over all 3, which, yeah, not very interesting. But I want to do 2, for example, so then I'm averaging for 2018, I'm averaging 2018 with itself because there's no year before, so that's going to be the same. For 2019, I'm taking the average of 2018 and 2019. 2019 for 2020, I'm going to take the average of 2019 and 2020. That's the window size. Done. Who designed this stuff? I did. Okay. So anyway, this is so easy. It works. Now, this is the first stuff you can do, right? Now, of course, notice that while I was doing all of this, my visual has been updated. And it's honestly not the best looking visual ever, right? And also notice that all of these expressions refer to what is on the visual, right? So I want to get rid of some of this because I don't want to see all of this stuff. I only, in fact, want to show the difference in profit and the running sum and the moving average. So what would I do? Well, I might be tempted to go and try to delete sales amount and total product cost and profit because I don't need them anymore, right? Well, remember what I said. Visual calcs can only refer to what's on the visual. So if I delete sales amount, profit refers to sales amount. So then profit will break because it has no idea what sales amount is, right? And in fact, if I rename this to, let's say, Christian's sales amount, then of course my profit has been updated because it refers to Christian's sales amount. So instead of deleting it, I can hide it. And if you go to the right here, you might see those familiar hide icons that you've seen in the model view. So I can now hide things from the visual. They will still be on the visual matrix, but they will be not shown on the visual. So I can now hide Christian's sales amount, total profit, total product cost, and profit. And I want to maybe move these things to the tooltips. See what's happening. The visual's updating, but the visual matrix is not updating. Yes, Christian, I wasn't specific. You pick which one. You can fight for it. Which sales amount? It's a lot of money. You're right. But you're doing well. If you look at, like, the years over years, you guys are doing well. The business is growing. I don't know about 2021 and 2022 yet, but in 2023, it's really old data. Anyway, all jokes aside, I was able to create this visual, and I'll back out of this. So I'll just now look at the visual. This visual didn't exist before. It is showing stuff that is the difference in profit and the running sum and the moving average that I was able to create in very quick order with just 4 lines of very simple one-line DAX that used to take multiple lines of DAX before and was sometimes prohibitive and really hard to do. And this is now so easy. It is almost like magic. So this has been my work, and not only my work, the work of our team for the last 3 years. So we designed all of this with the goal in mind of making it easier to work with DAX. So I hope that demo gives you a good feeling about, like, where we're headed and how that thing works. So let's just go back to the slides. So if you wanna make my day, so you could absolutely, if you want to share something on social media with the hashtags Power BI, hashtags mindblown, or hashtags visual calcs, or whatever you want to do, I'll find it. That will make my day. If you share the excitement about what we're working on, that would be really great. Thank you so much. So with that, let's take some questions. I think there's already a couple questions, great questions in the chat. So Christian, can you maybe help me there a little bit?
There was one from Adrian Cristea. Wait a second, previous. Can this change based on the sort filter? And how does previous work?
Yes. So great question. So right now, previous only works in the visual calcs, in the visual matrix sort order. So if I go into the slide, the demo, so I go into desktop. Where's my mouse? Come on. There. Sorry, multiple screens. If we go in here and we see this, this one, I need to see this one. So in here, what this does, it will operate over the visual matrix, right? So right now, previous is always taking one step up from where I am, right? So profit, of course, refers to this for 2019. But then previous profit means from this cell will go one step up. So that would be this, right? For this cell, one step up would be this number. So that's how this works. You can absolutely write things like 2 to make 2 steps. This would then skip one cell. So for 2020, it would jump to 2018. Make sense? Next goes the other way around. Next goes down the visual matrix. We have first that jumps up to the first cell, and last jumps up to jumps down to the last. So that's how previous works.
Yeah.
So yes.
Adi is asking, what if we sort them descending?
Yes, so that's a great question, because you can't. And that's also why I sent out the survey, because we're figuring this out, right? We've seen people asking for this.
Options.
Yes,
exactly.
We're thinking about what the options are. We've been seeing people asking for this. For example, if I change the sort order on this visual right now, and I say, you know what, I'm going to sort it by fiscal year descending, the visual will change, but my visual matrix doesn't, right? So now it's harder to understand how we got to this result, right? Because the moving average and the profit is now not the same as it was before, right? So here's where we have to figure out what is the right answer. So please fill out that survey that I sent out recently to help us understand what we should be doing. We have options. We already have a solution today to do this, which arguably is not easy, but it's doable, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Cool.
I have a question.
Yes.
And, it's not directly related to what you did here, but with the modifications that you are doing on the calculations. You said that every visual calculation is specifically related to a single visual, which means it cannot be reused, just like the measures, and it stays inside a single Power BI report, not
Correct.
reused inside the report, not reused in a different report.
Correct.
But when you are saving a Power BI file as a PBIT, as a report file, are these changes on the visual calculations tracked as changes from one part of or another in the same visual?
Yes.
So we can check in Tyndall, for example, and see the differences that I had on the previous version against the current version, right?
Yes, correct. So you're absolutely right. They're stored inside the PBIP file, inside the report file, and they are stored on the visual. So they are visual by visual right now. So if you think about reusability, I think about reusability as a spectrum from 0 to 10. Measures score about 8 out of 10. They're reusable across visual. It's not easy to reuse them across reports, so semantic models. So, 8 out of 10. Visual score a solid 0 out of 10. Visual calcs. You cannot reuse them at all. We want to make that better. We want to give them some. Sorry, go for it.
About reusability, I was just remembering the Fabricon.
Yes.
And the metrics that are coming there. Are those planning to be more reusable?
We'll have to figure that one out. We don't know yet what the answer is going to be. And honestly, it's not my highest priority right now. We have to fix things like formatting and conditional formatting and the sort order stuff, but it's absolutely on the list. We're actually talking about what the scenarios are that we can make this easier to reuse. Because reuse today is not great, right? Reuse today means copy paste. That's not good, because if you want to change the logic, you have to change it in multiple places. So that's one. The other thing is discoverability, which is also something that people have been asking for. We are updating the Scanner API to allow the Scanner API to return all visual calcs in all workspaces that the admin has access to. So that at least allows you to discover the visual calculations that people are using. But that's just monitoring and not reusability. So those two things are still coming. Still thinking through those. But right now, reusability is not great.
Yeah, one more question from Mihaela.
Yes.
What if you would add an index to the rows after the user is sorting, ascending or descending, and then use the index to see what first last means?
Yes, you can absolutely do that. That is a way to do it today. You can absolutely do that using also a brand new function that we're still working on called lookup, that I'm not ready to have you play with right now, but that already is something that's coming. You could absolutely eventually do that. But the answer right now for Michaela's question would be to use a window function, which I think some of you, I think the other Christian and others have already mentioned, offset. It's something that we can talk about in just a second. I think Nikos also has another question that he already asked all the way in the beginning. What is a use case for sorting each visual in the each column in the visual by a different custom sort order? That's a great question. We've seen people wanting to do that. Some people want to do, for example, a Pareto analysis that requires all the things to be sorted by the sales amount descending. So the largest one at the beginning, and then the smallest one at the end, or the vice versa, whatever. Just take sales amount descending. I always confuse these two. But then do that. So you want to do a running sum over the sales amount descending. So your curve will look like that. But then you wanted to do a moving average in the normal year order for whatever weird reason. And in those cases, if you want to do that, you need the ability to have the sort order per column, right? So yes, it's very advanced. but for highest flexibility, that's definitely something we have to consider. Cool. So with that, if there's no more questions, we'll just keep going in the slide.
Yes, please.
So what are visual calcs? They're DAX calculations. They're not a new language, right? That's very important to remember. And in scope thereof, we have new functions and new concepts. So it's just DAX. Most DAX will work if you have a current or switch to for an order category to divide your orders into small, medium, large. You can absolutely reuse that and put that into a visual calc. In fact, you'll probably get performance benefits from this as well, because visual calcs are faster than measures because they don't have to go back to the low level of data. They just work with the aggregated level of data. Basic arithmetic will work. We have new visual calcs functions. Now, why is this so simple? Well, here's a running sum example from before, right? The current DAX is calculate sum filter all selected is on or after with a max. Great, but you know, not easy. And then visual calcs is just a running sum, right? And let's do one more. I want to compare the number of restaurants in each state versus the state above. Well, on the left is your original DAX. I didn't write that. I had to reach out to Jeffrey Wang, the inventor of DAX, to actually do this. It includes a top and one trick, which is really hard for me to understand. And then we introduced window functions in December 2022. That makes life a little bit easier. That's just an offset with -1, but it's still not very easy. It's still an order by and all selected and a calculate. And then with visual calcs, I just showed you, it's just a very simple previous. So this should tell you that those previous functions and next and first and last, etc., are all just basically shortcuts to these window functions. So we have new levels of functions. We call them low, medium, and high level functions. The low level functions are window functions. We released them in December 2022. You might have seen that and went like, why are they doing this? And the real answer is we were planning to build visual calcs, but we were not ready to show you what we were building. So I was showing you the Lego pieces that I was playing with to put this house together, which were the window functions, but I wasn't showing you the full picture. So that then explains what we released in December 2022. Then the medium and high level functions are the visual calc specific functions that I've already shown you a couple of. So I'll show you the full list. So the low level functions is offset, index, window, rank, and row number. They have supporting functions with order by, partition by, and match by. These you can use in visual calcs, you can use them in measures, you can use them in calculated columns. Anywhere you can use DAX, you can use these. They are not as easy as it should be. And if you go back and reread the blog post from December 2022, I actually said that. It's like, yes, it makes things easier, but I want to make things even easier, which was my hint to something else is coming, which is now visual calcs. So you can absolutely write that previous using an offset. Previous is just a shortcut to offset -1. First is just a shortcut to index. Running sum is just a shortcut to window. Same for moving average. So then the medium level functions we have: previous, move up or left. Next, move down or to the right. First is move to the beginning. Last is move to the end. We have an inspection function that you can use with if is at level, for those that want to change return values on subtotals or grand totals. You can use is at level to figure out what total you are on and then do something else. So if you wanted to do an average on the total, you could do that. If you wanted to get a visual total on the total, you can do that. And then we have lattice navigation functions that allow you to walk up and down hierarchies. So if you have multiple levels, let's say year, quarter, month, you wanted to do a percentage of parent, you would do a, let's say the profit, divide profit by the percentage of my parent, which is a collapse of profit. Collapse meaning removing detail. Collapse removes all detail. Expand adds detail, right? So expand walks down, collapse walks up the hierarchy. And then we'll have a range function that just allows you to make it easier to select a window so you don't have to worry about order by. And then we have high level functions, running sum and moving average. We already talked about those two. I'm not going to repeat those. So that's what you need to know about the functions that we have. These functions you can only use in visual calcs, these medium and high level functions, because they have a specific parameter. And that's the axis parameter that I've been working with in Visual Calc when I did the demo, but I didn't show you because it has a default. So you don't have to specify that. And I said, there's only one thing you need to remember, the mental model with the visual matrix. This is the other thing to remember, axes. So there's new concepts. Visual matrix we already talked about. Axes we're going to talk about in a second. Reset as well. Direction is just a combination of axis and reset. And hidden we have already talked about. Right? The fact that I don't have to show the fields on the visual matrix on the visual. But the axis is what makes all of these things work. So think about axis as defining how the calculation traverses the visual matrix. How does it move over the visual matrix? What direction does it have while it's moving? Does it go up to down? Does it go left to right? Does it go something else? So this is what you will be working with when you're working with Visual Calcs. So default, it's set to rows. And you'll see rows as an icon in the product, and it's just called rows. And we'll show you the little downward pointing arrows. The way to read this is across the rows. So rows are horizontal, so across the row means top down vertical from top to bottom, right? You can also go left to right across the columns, right? Columns are vertical, so left to right means going horizontally. Columns means going across the columns, going horizontally, right? We'll see the little arrow in the product. And then we have the combinations, columns, rows, and rows, columns, which I like to think about the first one as a typewriter movement, the columns, rows, going horizontally. And then at the end, the old-timey typewriters, they went all the way at the beginning, and then they moved one line down. And you continue typing, you press enter, the thing moved all the way to the beginning, and the paper scooted one line down. That is what columns, rows are, right? You snake downwards like that. And then you can also do a 90-degree turn. I like to call that the planter movement. I don't know why, but think about a planter, a thing that puts like plants and seeds into fields. It goes down, drops the seed, goes up, moves to the left, to the right, sorry, goes down, goes up, moves, goes down, goes up, moves, right? So essentially that is what the columns, rows, and rows, columns is. And no, we haven't, Adrian, we haven't put that sound effect into the product. That would have been a good April Fool's joke, by the way. The moment you start columns, rows, and it goes, yeah. So just as a couple examples, first sales amount on rows. What this will do is for each row, retrieve the first sales amount in the first row, column by column. So look at the color coding. You see the dashed lines refer to the solid line. So for each year, we're getting the sales amount on rows, which happens to be categories. So the first sales amount for that year on the first category. So that is then always for the same year, the sales amount for accessories, right? So we get the same value for each row in the same year. Makes sense, right? Next one, 90-degree turn. Now we do first sales amount on columns. Now we have we're getting the sales amount across all the years, but getting the first sales amount on years, right? Because on columns, so now we're getting the for the same accessory, we're getting the sales amount for the first year. So instead of just doing the first sales amount for the first accessory, we're now doing the first sales amount for the first year, right? So now the color coding goes row by row by row, basically. And now to hurt your brain a little bit, let's do the other two as well. Previous sales amount on rows, columns is for each cell, retrieve the previous sales amount from the row above it or from the column to the left of it. So if we go and look at our highlight again, you'll see that this cell over here is empty. Why? Well, there's no row above me. And that would have been it if I just wrote previous sales amount on rows. But since I wrote columns, it can also check for the last cell in the previous column. There is no column to the left of me in the data, so this is going to be empty. This is easy, just gets that value, that value, that value, that value, that value. This would have been empty if I just wrote previous row, but since I wrote rows, columns, I'm allowed to take the previous value from here, from the previous column, the last cell. So this goes like a like a planter across my visual matrix, right? Let's turn this 90-degree again. Previous sales amount on columns, rows. So what this does is for each cell, retrieve the previous sales amount from the column to the left of me or from the row above me. Again, same thing. This thing is empty. Why? There's no column to the left of me, there's no row above me, there's nothing for me to do. This thing is not empty because there's a column to the left of me. Makes sense. This thing not empty because there's a column to the left of me to get it from. Great. This thing would have been empty if I wrote previous sales amount on columns, but since I wrote previous sales amount on columns rows, there's no column to the left of me, but there is a row above me, so I can get the previous value over here. And then, of course, the yellow matches the yellow. Now, these last two are very complicated and not very useful, to be honest. I don't expect you to use them all the time. They are useful in some scenarios. For example, if you have years on columns and quarter number 1, 2, 3, 4 on rows, and you wanted to do a running sum across the years, this would be useful, right? To refer to whatever that thing is, or a moving average across quarters. But otherwise, I don't think most people will use columns, rows, and rows, columns. You will mostly just use rows and columns. So with that, the last concept I want to talk about is reset. And reset is it's basically defining how a calculation restarts. So the default is none, which basically means while the calculation is traversing the visual matrix, it never restarts from 0. But you can also set it to restart sometimes and say lowest parent or highest parent, or n, a number, or a field reference. So you can eventually write running sum of profit reset by year, right? If you have years and quarters, you're defining the calculation. You probably don't want the running sum to continue for each new year. You probably want the running sum to restart for every new year, right? When the year changes to 2020, start from 0. Don't add the number from before and keep going. That's what reset none would be. But if I wrote reset on highest parent or reset on year in this example, I would actually get the running sum in the year, and then for each year it would restart from 0 again. So that's how reset will work. So that's reset. If you combine these two together, you get direction, and that's all you need to know about Visual Calcs. I know this is not easy. I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, but trust me, once you got the hang of this, it's way easier than what you used to do before in DAX. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. If you have feedback, if you have ideas, feel free to either fill out the survey for the specific short order question that I had, but in general, please use aka.ms/visual-calculations-feedback to give me feedback. Your feedback is really required and appreciated. It allows us to build a better solution, a better product. We're not done at all, but we're just getting started. So with that, I want to thank you for being here. And if there's any questions, I'll happily answer them.
Thank you, Jay. It was really, really great intro to visual calculations, and a lot of people in the chat are loving it, especially beginners that are just starting with DAX, because it's really, really helpful. And speaking about the feedback form, Christy already pasted the link in the chat, so everybody can answer it. Let's see if we have some questions. Yeah, there is one from Carlos, not specifically designed for visual calculations, but Jeffrey Wang is the godfather of DAX or god creator of DAX?
Well, I mean, he was the one creating it, so I think the creator. Together with Marius, and I don't know, the godfather is maybe, I don't know who that is. Maybe that's me eventually, I don't know, but maybe a little bit too much of a claim for me. But no, Jeffrey and Marius are the ones that I reach out to when I get stuck. And we had a bit of a plan to introduce something called Jeffrey as a service inside of the product, but Jeffrey didn't really like that. So I guess this is what we're gonna do.
Looking for my copy of Definitive Guide to DAX, because I remember I saw it in the forward that Marius was, which is Romanian, by the way, was also part of the creating team of DAX.
Yeah, absolutely. Marius and Jeffrey are the ones that are part of this. Yeah, these two are the ones that I work with. Yeah, so Marius and and Jeffrey are both here in the forward, as well as Christian Wade and Christian Petulescu, who is also Romanian, by the way. So yeah, but I work with Marius and Jeffrey all the time on this. They are heavily involved in Visual Calcs as well. Like every week they are part of this conversation. So yeah, it's very exciting. Jeffrey as a service was a great idea, but he didn't really like it.
Well, I think Marco already started this idea with the DAX optimizer. Marco as a service first.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's been interesting to see.
I don't see any other question in the chat.
Okay.
So either it was really clear everything, or it was too much at the end with the rows, columns, and the combinations. And to be honest, I have a different analogy in my head.
Okay.
With the typewriter, I have the letters in my head. It's a Z or an N in the row columns. So if you go column rows,
that's way easier. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Well,
it's just it is a Z and an N. You're right. Why would I make that a typewriter or a planter? Man, okay, I'm gonna steal that from you. Thank you.
No problem. Maybe I can contribute. Let's say like this.
Well, this is great. No, I love it. The Z or the N, that is exactly what it is. Yeah. No, I know, and that last part was a little bit like complicated, but for you to really grasp why this works this way, it's really important to understand these concepts. And we have our documentation, of course. We have our blogs from the various MVPs that are trying to make sure that people understand these concepts, right? There will be books that are written, training will be created, so all that is coming.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask a bit deeper question on formatting the values of visual calculations.
Yes.
Can you format it using the format?
No, not yet.
Function? Not yet.
Well, you can use the format function. Yes, absolutely. You can just slap the format function around it. The downside is format outputs text, not a number.
Yeah.
So
it's not gonna be visual. It will be only as a matrix.
Exactly. So that's a problem. So
if format is not completely supported yet, I shouldn't ask about dynamic format strings, right?
No. So you shouldn't. So we are actually working on format. So you will be able to format Visual Calcs very soon. There is something you can already do, right? If you go into this, right? Let's say it's a specific example, but let's say we want to have the data labels on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I wanted to change the format for this thing. I can use the visual level format strings to say, here's a, this one, right? Format code. Mm-hmm. And I can type something like, I don't know, what is it? This thing, I never know right away how to do this, right? So there we go, something, right? Mm-hmm. Format. You can see how this format works. So that is available for data labels and for the new card and new slicer visual, not for all visuals yet. You can also not do that for, let's say, the axis labels yet, right? So this is very limited, but it does exist.
There is a conditional format there with a DAX, so it cannot be used.
You cannot use the Visual Calcs for conditional formatting either yet. No.
Well, it shouldn't be there yet. There.
Yeah. It will be. It will be there. Like we will allow you to do formatting. We will allow you to do conditional formatting. We're actually working on that right now. But right now, no, there's no formatting other than doing either this thing using the data labels or do what you said, the format function. But that has its own downsides, right? So that is that's the situation today. And then dynamic format strings are even further ahead, right? Like, let's do the basic formatting first. Let's make sure that works. We do the conditional formatting next, and then we can talk about what dynamic format strings might mean for Visual Calcs. I don't even know if I understand yet what a dynamic format string for a visual calc means and how that should work, because that's really tied to like things like calculation groups, right? And then so that's really where that gets a little bit wonky for me. So I don't know how that's going to work, but let's do the basic things first. Let's make sure we have all visual types supported. Let's make sure that, because if you look at this, you might notice that not all visual types are supported, right? Loads of them are grayed out just because we haven't finished the work yet. We need to do that. Let's make sure that we work on reusability. Let's make sure we work on the sort order. Let's make sure on discoverability, format strings, conditional formatting. Maybe we missed a couple functions, who knows? Maybe people tell us like, hey, you know, moving average and running sum are great, but what about this? And then we can talk about dynamic format strings, maybe. We're on page 40 out of 110 of the functional spec that I wrote for this. So we have lots of stuff still left to do.
Okay, got it. There is one more question, the last one in the chat from Nikos. Will something like quick measures be available, like a repository of visual calcs to select from, even a custom repository, company-wide, for example?
So quick measures. Quick measures has a repository, right? And this is the equivalent of that, right? In here, if there's actually this thing, right? That's the equivalent. There is no company repository for quick measures. There's no company repository for visual calcs. We've been thinking about that, but it's not very high up on our list.
We are still waiting the Power Query one first.
Right, exactly. So let's do that one first. No, I mean, the problem with company repositories, it opens a whole box of Pandora, right? You have to like, what about security? What about rights? Like all that permission model comes into play. It is way harder to think about that. So right now, no, it's just one set. Like with quick measures, you cannot change the set that's there. Same for visual calcs.
Still, we have one more. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, of course.
Well, one from Vicencio. Is it possible for the measures created in the visual to be aligned with that visual and to be used in future reports when that visual is used without those combinations of measures? So this is the reusability that we were talking about.
Yeah, if you copy paste a visual, you will bring over the visual calcs with that. The visual calcs are on the visual. So you can absolutely reuse these visual calculations on like that. But is it true reuse? No, because if I wanted to change the logic for any of these, I would have to go in for every visual that has the same visual calculation and update the logic, and I don't think that's great. So you will be able to copy paste the visual, but that's not real reuse for me. So I think we can do better than that. We should do better than that, but we're figuring out what it is. And then indeed the visual calcs are part of the Timble, and they are part of the report file as well eventually, once that's there. So they are in there, so you can already do source control, you can already do all that, you can do divs. So yeah, there's all that stuff.
It's getting better and better.
Yes, it will.
One more question. Yeah. I don't want to be mean here, but do you have a plan to go GA?
Of course I have a plan, but I'm not willing to talk about the date.
Okay, thank you.
No, I mean,
no,
I'm half joking, but of course we have a plan to go GA.
Yeah, of course, but I was asking in terms of making it public. Can we expect it GA by the end of the year?
Probably not. It will probably be next year, early next year. I'm hoping, and because it really depends on the feedback, right? Like, and also how, like, we have a lot of stuff still to do, like buttoning up stuff, like what I said, like format strings, conditional formatting, all the visual types, like all the interactions with our order features, field parameters, another one, right? We have to do all of that, which we know there's approximately the amount of effort required for that work. But then we have a couple of relative unknowns, like sort order, like reuse, like discoverability. What do people want us to build, right? And we are just starting to think about sort order, right? That's also why I called out the survey, to see what people ask, right? And if everybody tells me, I want to build this. I need you guys to build the full thing, the whole beautiful car, all polished, right? That will take longer than if you tell us, oh, just do the quick and dirty, cheap solution, right? So same thing for reuse, same thing for discoverability, same thing for all the other stuff that we still have to do. If people, when we ask them, say, I want to build this Ferrari, great, then we build the Ferrari, but building a Ferrari takes longer than us building a very simple car. So that's how I don't know the end date, because it really depends on these big things that we don't know yet what people want and how much time
and
that's
their
gonna take.
impact and their impact on everything else.
Yes, so that's how we will figure that one out. Right now, we said early 2025 is the end date. But we'll see. We'll see. It really depends on you all feedback, and that means you should not hold off, right? Please try it now. Please try this feature. Give us the feedback, because only on that feedback we can decide that how we prioritize things and how we keep working. If I don't get any feedback for this feature, it will never be finished. Exactly. So please keep the feedback coming as well.
Christy already pasted here, and we will make sure to share it on LinkedIn for others.
Great.
So
awesome.
Thank you very much. Let's go 2 minutes for the raffle and then come back and wrap everything up. So
cool.
Let me share my screen. It should be visible. My screen should be visible. And as I said, we have a pretty international attendance today. Let me make sure I have the latest data here and get everybody's registration for the raffle. So we have 12 participants. Let's see who is the participants, and I'm using Power Query, of course, to get the names and the IDs. The 12 participants are here.
I'm not seeing your screen, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not seeing
Christy?
it.
I see it.
Okay, that's
Anyone
just me.
Else?
Don't worry.
Anyone else in the chat? I can see it. So Takami says that she can see it. Well, I said I wouldn't want to mess everything in the end. So Vincenzo is also seeing it, so probably it's on your end, Jay.
That's okay. That's okay. Don't worry.
Okay, and the raffle now with the tool, the magic tool of Wheel of Names. Well, this is an online tool that where I'm pasting all the names from the raffle. I'm just shuffling all the names, and let's see who is the first winner. Drum roll, please. Bogdan, you are the first winner. Congrats. And let's shuffle the names again and see our second winner. Drum roll. Philip, congrats. You're the second winner. Well, I will contact you after the meetup to confirm your email addresses. And as soon as I know exactly what are your email addresses that you want to register for Enterprise DNA, you will get access there. Jay, thank you again for coming and taking the time to explain the entire thing to us. It was a really great session, and I loved it. Even if I saw it before, I'm still learning new things, and I'm asking, I'm learning from the questions that are coming, and I'm getting new questions every time. Thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it was my pleasure, Kuplachere, for doing this. And yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for being part of the community and taking time out of your evenings to do this. And please try the feature. So give us feedback.
Yep, we will. We will for sure.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining, and looking forward to see you in 2 weeks for the 2 consecutive Romanian sessions. Whoever speaks Romanian can come. Whoever doesn't speak Romanian is also welcome, because Excel and Power BI has tech is a general language. So thank you all for joining. I will stop the recording now, and whoever wants to stay more, feel free. I will unlock the videos and the mics, and we can still hang around in the chat. Bye, everyone.